You're listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla. In our previous episode, we presented Part 1 of Super Soldiers and Ascended Masters. Today, we present to you Part 2.
So here we have a Singapore super soldier. Stephen Chua was also trained to fight different types of extraterrestrials, including Draco reptilians. And what he described in his interview with Elena Danaan needs to be given credit here because she was the first person to interview Stephen Chua, because Stephen Chua was very concerned about retaliation if he went public. And so he looked around to find out who would be someone that would understand the information that he had and the significance of it and would be willing to put it out. So he identified Elena Danaan as being the right person to put out his information. Her interview with Stephen, along with correspondence with Stephen, you can find in her book that came out on June 1st, Area 51. So if you haven't got a copy, definitely get a copy. Conversations with insider Stephen Chua. Now, what Stephen said was that he had high gamma brainwave activity that led to him being invited to go to Area 51, that he was tested for his extraordinary abilities that led to him being invited to join the elite Singaporean Special Forces and actually got to be part of the Singaporean Prime Ministers, and that was Lee Kuan Yew, very famous Prime Minister for Singapore, that he was part of this personal security detail for Lee Kuan Yew. And Stephen was identified as among an elite group of humans that had these incredible mental abilities. He's had an extraordinary high IQ, speed, strength, and gamma brainwave activity was off the charts. So when the Americans heard about this Singaporean super soldier, they got one of their people to go over there and test Stephen Chua, who's now working for the Singapore Prime Minister's Special Forces, and they tested him, and his gamma brainwave activity was off the charts. It was like, whoa! So the Americans said, well, we want this guy. We want him to come to the United States, and we want him to work for us. And Lee Kuan Yew, a very powerful individual, actually, even though Singapore's a small city-state there in Southeast Asia, he said no, but I'll loan him to you for a little while. So I think it was a couple of months or whatever period of time. Stephen went to Area 51, and he went there because Area 51 pilots, they were trying to use this fly-by-thought technology on a modified F-15. And it's very interesting. If you look at the records, there's you have different iterations of the F-15, the F-15A, B, C, D, E, and the F-15J, but no F-15F. Why is that? Well, the F-15F was a modified F-15 that incorporated fly-by-thought technology. What the Air Force did was that they would get pilots to try to use this fly-by-thought technology, and because they realized that to be able to operate this technology, which was reverse engineered from extraterrestrials, that an individual had to generate a sufficiently high level of gamma brainwave activity. And what happened was that they developed a serum that would temporarily raise the gamma brainwave activity of their pilots, but because whether it was a limitation of the serum, whether it required a kind of natural ability to produce high gamma brainwave activity or a stimulation of the pineal gland, whatever it was, these pilots began dying. A lot of them were dying, and so or suffering severe brainwave activity. So that's when the Air Force became interested in Stephen, because they wanted to see whether someone who organically produced a sufficiently high level of gamma brainwave activity could fly the planes, and actually succeeded. He flew these planes effortlessly, just using his mind, because his gamma brainwave activity, enabled him to be able to kind of like, it requires a certain degree of intelligence, speed, mental acuity, and he was able to do all these things without being brain damaged in any way. So as a result of studying Stephen, the Air Force realized that this technology was too advanced, that they would have to abandon the project because the human pilots was just not up to it, and the serum wasn't solving the problem. Now, we actually have confirmation of sorts that of this actually happening. Now, confirmation not of the particular instance that Stephen described, but confirmation of something happening when it came to people interacting with the extraterrestrial technologies. So there's a clip that Tucker Carlson did where he talked about an insider, a high-level insider, well, actually a neurosurgeon from Stanford Medical Center, I think it was, who confided to him that he worked with over 100 pilots who either died or suffered severe brain trauma because they got too close to UFOs or extraterrestrial technology. So let's listen to that clip by Tucker Carlson.
From this guy who's a tenured Stanford Medical School professor. He comes on and he's like, 11 years ago, the US government reached out to me because I'm an expert on head injuries, on brain injuries, traumatic brain injuries. And they had all these court cases from families of US servicemen, over 100, who'd been killed by UFOs. The Department of Defense was refusing to give them death benefits or medical benefits. And he's like, so they're in the courts. And I was like, there are over 100 servicemen killed by UFOs? Like, what? He's like, yeah. And there are court cases about it. I'm like, why isn't this on the front page of the news? I don't know. And in a number of cases, these things have landed on military bases, including famously in Germany, in West Germany in the 70s. And servicemen have approached them. And they approach and they get traumatic brain injury or they're killed. And he studied their brains.
Okay, so there you have Tucker Carlson telling his story about how over a decade ago he heard that over 100 pilots suffered because they got too close to some extraterrestrial technology or a UFO, which is a corroboration partially of what Stephen Chua said about what happened when you would have these Air Force pilots interacting with this reverse engineered extraterrestrial technology when it was just requiring too much in terms of human abilities, gamma brainwave activity. So what are gamma brainwaves? So, these are, according to what I've just said, the key to these extraordinary human abilities and the key to be able to access and use extraterrestrial technologies. So you have at the bottom end of that chart there, you can see delta brainwaves from 1 to 3 hertz, theta brainwaves from 4 to 8 hertz. Then you have the alpha brainwave from 9 to 33 hertz, and then you have beta from, what's that, 33 to
Beta is 14 to 30.
Okay, 9 to 13 for alpha. For alpha is 9 to 13. Sorry, yeah. So alpha is 9 to 13. Beta is 14 to 39, and then gamma is 40 and above. Okay, so each of those brainwave states correspond with different levels of human performance, from kind of like deep sleep, relaxation, meditation, ordinary working behavior, and then gamma brainwave is where you access higher brain activities, where extraordinary levels of concentration, psychic abilities, higher level abilities come online. So those without high gamma brainwave activity suffer brain injuries when using reverse engineered ET close or tech or getting too close. So yeah, gamma brainwaves are the key to using or accessing extraterrestrial technology. So developing high gamma brainwaves, how does one develop these if one wants to optimize human performance, whether it's to become a super soldier or to become proficient in meditation, to reach those higher levels of human peak performance. Deep meditation, breathing exercises, time in nature, these are things that people can do. Tibetan gongs, binaural beats, hemisync music. Okay, great. You can just listen to these things and gongs and binaural beats, or out-of-body experiences and remote viewing training. I mean, there's organizations like the Monroe Institute and different groups that train people for remote viewing that can also train you to use gamma brainwave or stimulate the pineal gland and create these high gamma brainwaves. And what's that? Pistachios. Oh, pistachios. Okay, that's my trigger. That's my trigger for higher brainwave states. So this is how I produce gamma brainwaves. Pistachio nuts, preferably the organic. You don't want to poison your stuff, your body with the genetically modified pistachio nuts, but definitely for people like me who are mediocre meditators and we don't get to spend as much time doing breathing exercise and listening to Tibetan gongs, we have pistachio nuts. So there you go. Get your pistachio nuts now. Increase your gamma brainwave activity. So at the bottom there's an URL. You can go and actually get some of the binaural beats. And I find it very interesting. I've been playing these in the background. You could do it just having it in the background while you're doing your normal online activities. Just have these binaural beats just playing. And this particular website has binaural beats for 40, 50, 60, and 70 hertz. And I find that really very stimulating. And I find that my concentration improves and I'm able to kind of like be more productive when I'm listening to this in the background. So definitely just go to that website at the bottom and you'll or do a Google search for gamma 70 hertz and you'll go to this website. It's in Switzerland and you'll get to kind of like sample some of that incredible binaural beats that does help create these gamma brainwaves. Okay, Masters of Wisdom and Ascended Masters. So now we move into this other way that human performance can be optimized. And this is to achieve extraordinarily high levels of wisdom as opposed to knowledge, and something called ascended mastery. So what is that? Is there a difference between a master of wisdom and an ascended master? And are there different pathways to get to one or the other? So hopefully in this section of the presentation, I'll give you an idea of what these different types of beings are, how you're able to achieve those states of consciousness, and the different pathways that exist to that. Well, we can go back in history and find that there are examples of these individuals that achieve these extraordinarily high states of consciousness, but also could be considered super soldiers in a way. You have India's Rishi Kings. You have China's warrior monks. So their ability to master mind matter gave them exceptional psychic abilities. Communications with extraterrestrials. So they were communicating with the off-world visitors. They were able to find and use ancient technologies found all over the world, and they were natural leaders. They were recognized by people in those societies where they operated, certainly in India, China. These were recognized as exceptionally wise leaders. Now, what gave them these abilities? Was that these people could spend long periods of time in these elevated states of consciousness. Sometimes in India it's called samadhi, and this would be where an individual like this gets habituated to be able to generate high levels of gamma brainwave activity, and those higher brainwave states just become natural and organic, which enables them to do things like interact with extraterrestrials, interact with or find ancient technologies, or to be able to use some of those ancient technologies or extraterrestrial technologies, telepathy, psychokinesis, and so forth. So India's Rishi Kings and China's warrior monks, these are kind of like ancient examples of individuals that had some of these extraordinary abilities. Now, the Great White Brotherhood, that brings us to the work of Helena Blavatsky, a Russian psychic who she was around in the 1900s. This was her first book, Isis Unveiled, that came out in 1877. So she, from 1831 to 1891, was the first to identify the Great White Brotherhood as spiritual adepts that could move through space-time using powerful psychic abilities or cities to protect Earth and the divine plan. So she described meetings with beings she called El Moya, Master Kutumi, and others that had this ability to just appear, like to teleport into her room, wherever she was, and to talk with her and to share some wisdom and information with her. So that's very interesting that they had those abilities. And so she talked about how these this Great White Brotherhood was organized, and the kind of range of abilities that they had. So she was the first to talk about the Great White Brotherhood. Then you have one of her followers, Charles W. Leadbeater. He wrote quite a number of theosophical texts in the late 1800s to the early 1900s about the Great White Brotherhood. And this is what he wrote. The Great White Brotherhood also includes members of the heavenly host, the spiritual hierarchy directly concerned with the evolution of our world, beneficent members from other planets that are interested in our welfare. So he was pointing to this Great White Brotherhood as not just limited to the Earth, as operating on Earth, but also that they were connected to off-planet civilizations and to visitors from these other worlds that would come here and interact with us, and that there was a kind of spiritual hierarchy, if you like, and that spiritual hierarchy, you naturally would have those that excelled in terms of spiritual knowledge, and these high-level abilities would be higher up this hierarchy, and those that didn't have those kinds of abilities and maybe just relied on technology like extraterrestrials would be lower in that hierarchy. So very, very interesting books, the Theosophical Society, but they were talking about these ascended masters back then. Blavatsky, Leadbeater, and others talked about these ascended masters and described them as free of the reincarnation cycle. This is where we get into a key idea of what distinguishes an ascended master from an individual that just has, say, exceptional psychic abilities. These are free of the reincarnational cycle. That they are the kind of functional equivalents, if you like, of the bodhisattvas in Buddhist philosophy. So Leadbeater says that the ascended masters, they are beyond the necessity of rebirth. When one body wears out, they can choose another whenever it may be most convenient for the work they wish to do. So Leadbeater is very clear that the ascended masters are free of the reincarnation cycle. So this is where I think you can make a distinction between, say, a master of wisdom, someone who has reached high levels of meditation and is able to produce incredible, say, gamma brainwave activity and do remarkable things, but still may not have reached that ascended mastery stage because they are still kind of trapped in the reincarnational cycle, because they still haven't worked out or the desires that, according to the Buddhists, is what traps you in the reincarnational cycle. That's the mark of true wisdom of an ascended master. That those desires to come back and perform whatever it is that you still desire, that's all gone. It's been extinguished. There's a very interesting set of books by Baird Spalding that came out in the early 1900s, where he described an expedition of 11 scientists to the Himalayan regions of Tibet and India that was helped by a fraternal order of ascended masters able to defy the laws of physics through the power of consciousness. So in his books, in his series, I think there were 6 of them, he described how these ascended masters would kind of interact with the scientists, and they had incredible abilities, telepathy, telekinesis, teleportation, and they did this without any kind of physical technology, and by the very fact that they could live in the Himalayas, extraordinarily cold, frigid environment, but wearing loincloths or very simple garments without any kind of protective garments, again, attested to them being quite exceptional, having these higher abilities. And so you have these ascended masters that were reported by Spalding and others. There's a book that came out in 1973 by J.J. Hurtak that described many brotherhoods of ascended masters all over the universe that cooperate with one another. So according to Hurtak, who says he was taken to the celestial realms and interacted with these higher level beings from different hierarchies, these ascended masters form these brotherhoods that extend all over the universe and that they largely cooperate with one another. So another source that talks about ascended masters, which is very rich in detail, and it's not easy reading. You have to spend a lot of time going through J.J. Hurtak's The Keys of Enoch. You have to read it kind of like almost like a couple of pages at a time, because it's just so jam-packed with information, and you need to meditate on it. But it's worth it if you can do it. Paramahansa Yogananda, this was something that was very, I love reading this. It's probably one of my favorite books. I first came across this in, I think it was 1985 or something, and definitely was inspired by this. So Paramahansa Yogananda, he achieved elevated states of consciousness. He described it as Nirvikalpa Samadhi, this kind of like state of oneness with the entire universe, where your consciousness merges with the universe, which she calls Nirvikalpa, where ego dissolves into the universe. Whereas he says there's a lesser state of consciousness. He talked about Savikalpa Samadhi, which is where you still keep your separative ego state, and you could kind of like still experience this sense of oneness. Back in the 80s, I was full of enthusiasm. That sounds fantastic. I want to achieve Savikalpa Samadhi. So I meditated year after year, and my meditation practice was pretty mediocre. I didn't get anywhere near anything what he described, but the aspiration was there, even though the accomplishment wasn't. So who knows what the future holds? But definitely, he and others have achieved these higher states of consciousness. And he spoke of his order being headed by an ascended master. Now, if we distinguish between a master of wisdom and an ascended master, at this point, we can say Paramahansa Yogananda was clearly a master of wisdom. But his teacher, his ultimate guru, was this being, Babaji. And he described Babaji as an ascended master. So Babaji lived in the Himalayas with a few select followers, and Babaji was free of the reincarnational cycle. So he was an eternal. He didn't need to be born again. He had escaped all desire to be born, to achieve some unfulfilled desire. I mean, the Buddhists teach this very well, that if you have some subconscious desire that has not been fulfilled, you'll reincarnate again. So it's only when you extinguish all your desires, both conscious and unconscious, then you become free of the reincarnational cycle. Now, this is where there's a lot of confusion. People think, well, that means I need to become an ascetic or something, renounce everything. No, you just have to renounce the desire, because you could be in deep meditation or living in a monastery for all your life, but there's within you, there's a desire still for material goods. So you have to distinguish that desire somehow. So Babaji has these tremendous psychic powers that are similar to what Baird Spalding described in The Masters of the Far East. You could read about it in Paramahamsa Yogananda's Autobiography of a Yogi. Fantastic book. I can't recommend it high enough. Well, this is where we get into the contactees. How do the contactees relate to this field of ascended masters, the Himalayas, masters of wisdom, and so forth? Okay, well, there's a few contactees that have talked about these beings and how these beings work with and interact with different extraterrestrial civilizations. So Adamski, which is not well known, was taken to the Himalayas for several years by a mysterious stranger when he was 12 years old. And he spent 3 to 6 years there in the Himalayas being trained in meditation and yoga. And so this is all described in a book by Gerard Artson, George Adamski, A Herald for the Space Brothers. So Artson dug up he did incredible research to come up with this information about Adamski. Because if you look at the contactee literature, the UFO literature, they all portray Adamski as a fraud, as a charlatan. And, that's the typical thing. I mean, you think contactees have it bad today? Back in the 1950s, boy, they had it really bad then. It's the same old story. Contactees have been trashed since the 1950s, and organizations like the FBI were involved in trashing Adamski and others. And that continues even today, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So Adamski was trained in meditation, and that became an important foundation for his later ET contacts, because I think what Adamski did in these deep meditations in the Himalayas was that he was training his body to produce high gamma brainwave activity, and because that's the key to safely interacting with extraterrestrials and their technologies. I've already shown that earlier on. If you want to interact safely with extraterrestrials, you need to be able to produce gamma brainwave activity at extraordinarily high levels. So this is why meditation, being able to spend time in nature, listening to Tibetan gongs, or like hemisync or binaural beats or pistachio nuts, these are all good for producing high gamma brainwave activity. So Adamski talked about his ET contacts. 1952, November 20, he was the first prominent contactee to emerge due to his famous desert landing incident, where there were 6 witnesses that saw Adamski meeting with an extraterrestrial orthon who emerged from a flying saucer. So you had 6 witnesses. They saw the extraterrestrial coming out of the craft, which landed nearby. There was footprints of the extraterrestrials. They took photographs of the footprints. And so people always say, well, where's the evidence? Adamski had lots of evidence, but it didn't matter. It really, when people say, show me the evidence, what they're really saying is, I don't believe a word you say. No matter what you tell me, I'll continue to trash talk you, because that's what they did to Adamski. Because Adamski had photographic evidence, he had supporting witness testimony. There were Project Blue Book files that showed the same UFOs. There were UFO sightings in the area, independently confirming Adamski's November 20 encounter with Orthon. None of that mattered. They trash talked him. So so there's a program to discredit contactees that goes back to the 1950s with Adamski. So Adamski met this extraterrestrial Orthon who came from the craft. So that's when contact was first made, physical contact was first made, and Adamski could safely interact with the extraterrestrial. He could safely interact with the craft. The reason why? Because he had spent years in the Himalayas developing meditation and developing these high levels of gamma brainwave activity to do that. That's not something you're going to learn at the Air Force Academy, guys. Those of you that want to kind of like, reverse engineer, study these extraterrestrial craft, you can't take shortcuts. There's no serums, no pharmaceutical drugs, no matter what Pfizer or these big pharmaceutical companies will tell you. That's going to screw up the brains of whoever's stupid enough to take those serums or those pharmaceutical products. You can't take shortcuts here, guys. You got to do the deep meditation. You got to achieve those high states of consciousness. And when you do that, then you'll be able to safely interact with these craft and these technologies. So that's for those people watching this webinar that are hooked into the intelligence community. Thank you for participating and paying your $35. Appreciate it. Okay, so Adamski meets an ET master. So 1953, Adamski was taken into a cigar-shaped ET mothership where he met Orthon and other human-looking activities. So on the cover of his book, Inside the Spaceships, you have photos showing five or six, I think it was five scout craft emerging out of a cigar-shaped ship. And it wasn't just one photo, it was a series of photographs Adamski took of a cigar-shaped ship with these scout craft coming out of it and being around the spacecraft. So this was in the 1950s, early 1950s, well before Photoshop and CGI and all of that. You had the photographic negatives and all of that. Still, they called Adamski a fraud. He had these great quality photographs. So, as I said, it doesn't matter how many photographs you produce and physical evidence you produce. As long as the deep state wants to discredit you, they will just say, fraud, hoaxer, scammer, and they'll come out with all these kind of like ways to discredit you. And that continues to this day. More about that soon. Okay, so what Adamski encountered when he went inside of this cigar-shaped ship was that he interacted with Orthon and other extraterrestrials, but found that they were led by a master of wisdom. This is what Adamski said in his book, Inside the Spaceships. Quote, "Now, as we sat around the table, all eyes turned to the oldest spaceman as he began to speak. It was impossible not to realize that I was in the presence of a greatly evolved being. And the attitude of all present clearly indicated that they, as well as I, felt very humble before him. I learned that his age in his present body was close to 1,000 years. So Adamski is describing clearly an encounter with an ascended master that the extraterrestrials on that scout craft recognized as someone that was highly evolved, possessing superior wisdom and knowledge. So what this shows is that the extraterrestrials understood that these masters of wisdom are wise beyond the technology developed by these advanced extraterrestrial civilizations, that the extraterrestrials understand that what trumps technological development is consciousness. And unlike our world, where people who develop high consciousness are kind of like trash talk and kind of like sidelined, in the worlds of extraterrestrial civilizations, individuals that excel in these higher states of consciousness are respected and honored as teachers, as revered masters. Imagine living in a world like that, where those that actually excel in higher consciousness, those that are truth tellers, that recognize and speak the truth and resonate with that, and you can feel that truth resonating with them. Imagine living in a world like that. I think that's what lies ahead of us, but we still have a lot of work to do. Okay, now Bob Renault and the Corendians. Here's another contactee in the 1960s. He established contact in 1961 with a group of extraterrestrials that came from a planet called Corendor. And these initial radio communications led to physical encounters with the extraterrestrials, where he was taken on trips into space, visiting extraterrestrial bases that were located in underground areas of Massachusetts. And he worked with a very prominent contactee of the time, Gabriel Green, who was a political candidate. He ran for the president. I think he was the first UFO contactee or researcher, Gabriel Green, to run for any kind of federal office in the United States. So I think he was running for federal office, could be state office, but certainly he was a political candidate that did run in several campaigns. So there is a website that you can go to called the TerraCore Files. So you go to that website, and he talks about his initial meetings with these masters. And so in his meeting with a master in August 1961, that's August 19, Renault talked about how the Correndians worked with these masters of wisdom, or ascended masters. Bob Renault said, quote, "I have heard of many masters from our contactees. How do you attain that honored status?" So Cullen Lee is this master of wisdom that works with the Correndians. And he answered, "My brother, you have just asked the eternal question. What makes a master?" Cullen Lee continued, "To simplify perhaps a bit too much, one becomes a master by service to humanity. Christ was a master, for he brought the message of the brothers directly to the people of your world." So Yeshua, Jesus of Nazareth, was a master, according to this extraterrestrial master, because he was in exemplary service to others. And he brought the message of the brothers directly to the people of the world. So what that tells us is that Jesus of Nazareth was working directly with extraterrestrials. Now, I just did an interview that came out earlier in this week with Corinna Pataki, where she talks about different figures in the biblical texts, including Jesus of Nazareth or Yeshua, and their connection with different extraterrestrials. So I think this is absolutely correct. Jesus was one of these masters that was associated with these space brothers, with these off-world visitors. Exactly how, we don't know. We can guess, can speculate, or go to Corinna Pataki's interview I did, where we talk and speculate about who Jesus really was. So this master from Corridor goes on. "Tesla is a master for his service to the enrichment of your planet's knowledge." Okay, so Tesla, he was also a master for his commitment to presenting this advanced technology which could elevate humanity out of the kind of like 19th century into the 21st century. And I think what happened was that the technology that Tesla pioneered, the knowledge he shared, was so advanced, and the deep state, and here we're talking about the petroleum industry, the pharmaceutical industry, shut Tesla down very, very quickly, because they did not want his inventions to come up with alternative technologies or knowledge that would provide unlimited power to supply the energy needs of all humanity, and these advanced healing technologies that would cure people as opposed to treat people with pharmaceutical products that are designed to addict them without healing them. So Tesla was a master for his service. Very interesting. So the Correndians spoke about an alliance of worlds where masters of wisdom would be recognized as planetary leaders to their highly evolved spiritual qualities. So if you go to the TerraCore Files and you read those, what comes through is that the way in which this alliance of worlds is organized is one where these spiritual masters of wisdom or ascended masters are recognized as natural leaders and often would represent that planet in negotiations with other extraterrestrial civilizations, because they had these intrinsic qualities where, you know, not only could they have abilities like telepathy, clairvoyance, clairaudience, telekinesis, and so forth, but abilities that mark them apart from mere mortals that relied on ordinary technology. But those abilities would give them the capacity to recognize truth. And I think that's what is very critical for any civilization that starts to kind of join the galactic community. To what degree does your leadership resonate with truth? To what degree does the public feel your leaders talking about truth? I mean, when you hear someone like Robert Kennedy Jr. talking, you know, the guy speaks truth. You can feel it. Whereas when you hear other politicians talking, often it's just, you know, just blah, blah, blah. You don't feel anything other than just self-interest and self-promotion, because you can feel it. And I think this is one of the things that advanced civilizations recognize, that the truth tellers emit a particular resonance. And as that civilization evolves, the people identify it and they recognize that as a person that they want to give them wise counsel. And why wouldn't you make a person like that a natural leader? Okay, so another example, Enrique Rincon, he was taken by a group of Pleiadians of 24 extraterrestrial contactees training to be ambassadors to a remote location in the Andes. So in his book, UFOs and A Great New Dawn for Humanity, he describes how the extraterrestrials took the contactees to meet with a master of wisdom. And again, just like Adamski described the extraterrestrials in that encounter on board on the cigar-shaped ship, that the extraterrestrials regarded that master as a figure of great wisdom and reverence. Similarly, the extraterrestrials that Rincon described saw this master of wisdom as someone quite extraordinary. So here Rincon describes meeting a master of wisdom. So he has an illustration in his book that shows this master of wisdom just coming out of this tunnel, also this cave that was formed out of the rock there in the Andes. So the ET instructor approached the entrance to a tunnel. The most incredible being made his appearance. That being looked exactly like Jesus, the master. I thought immediately that the Pleiadians had brought us here with the purpose of meeting Jesus Christ. You know, this being just radiated or exuded a quality, an elevated state of consciousness that Rincon thought, well, you know, I've only felt this or read about this or experienced something like this when I've read about the life of Jesus. So he thought this was this was Jesus in the flesh. But this master actually spoke, and he said, I am not who you believe I am. My name is 1,000 names. Give me any and that I am. I am ancient before you, not in age, but in knowledge. I am wisdom, and my name is wisdom. I hold 35% of universal wisdom. Okay, so this is a being that is saying, no, I'm not Jesus Christ, who you think I am. I am someone else. I am an eternal, or I am. My name is age. I have 1,000 names. I am ancient before you, but not in age. So here he's talking about him keeping a youthful body through the power of consciousness. So, you know, that's something that is also described by Paramahansa Yogananda concerning Babaji, that Babaji, even though he's thousands of years old, he has this youthful appearance, as did that Master of Wisdom on the spacecraft. So here we can say, because this being is an ancient, not in terms of physical appearance, but in but in knowledge, that we could be talking about an ascended master as opposed to a master of universal wisdom. That's a distinction I'm not very clear about, but certainly we can talk about that later in the Q&A. So James Gilliland, he's also someone who I think has established quite a reputation in the UFO field. He's been around for 40 years. If you haven't been to Mount Adams to be part of a retreat where you see the UFOs there and the elevated energies that are there. I went there with Angelica back in 2006. We spent, I think it was 5 days or a week there at Mount Adams. Fantastic, incredible vibration and energy. And it just, that place exudes high consciousness. And so it's no accident that James Gilliland has had lots of interactions with these beings. And he's written about it in various books. One of the books, The Ultimate Soul Journey, he says, there are legions of masters, saints and sages, spiritually and technologically advanced off-worlders, multidimensional beings assisting in the planetary liberation. So in there you have pictures of some of these different beings. At the bottom right-hand corner, you have Babaji, who I've already talked about. You have these feline beings, which are also very advanced in terms of consciousness. So, yeah. And of course, Jesus, and I think that's probably Akhenaten up there, Jesus. Definitely, yeah, he has a lot to say on the topic of Ascended Masters. Okay, so this takes me to Elena Danan's meeting recently with Enki, or Ea, who is also an Eternal. So, is he an Ascended Master? I think he probably is. So let's kind of listen a little bit about what Elena Danan has to say about her meeting with Enki. So let's first play this clip so you get a sense of who Enki is.
Meeting physically with Ea, beamed on board Thorhan's ship and rode on the Nibiru ship, and then beamed on board the Nibiru ship from Thorhan's ship that stays around the Nibiru ship in the orbit of it. And the Nibiru ship is big enough that it creates a gravitational field. If you want to imagine and to have an idea, the Nibiru ship is probably as big as Earth, Moon, Luna. Every time I'm meeting here, which happens regularly, I am asking him the same question. Will you come to Earth? Will you come back to Earth? Please, people are asking for you to visit. They want to meet you and to see you and to thank you for everything you've been doing. And the answer is always, well, he says, I will not, my decision is that I will not come back to Earth, because I do not want to be either worshipped or thrown stoned at, which I understand. He has really good ethics and he's a very loving heart. He's very compassionate and he's humble. Even though he is the heir of the Anarch Empire now, his humility is mind-blowing. So I could understand this.
Okay, so there you've heard Elena talking about her meetings with Enki and Ea, and one of the critical questions was, well, when are you going to come back? Are you going to come back? What would happen if he came back? Here's a being that was involved with the creation of the human genome and the creation of the different avatar bodies that make up giants and the hosts for the Anunnaki going back to Sumerian times and much earlier than that. So clearly a being of extraordinary wisdom and knowledge, and according to Elena Danan's information, a very high, elevated state of consciousness as well, and a very compassionate, loving being. And yeah, is he coming back? That's the question she's asking, and you heard her response. Now, I think this is very significant because let's just, for the moment, consider that Elena is absolutely correct that she had these physical meetings with Enki. Yeah. And he brings back this kind of like higher knowledge of human genetics, the original genetic DNA or blueprint for humanity before it was tinkered or interfered with by other Anunnaki scientists working for his half-brother Enlil. And he has the capacity to kind of like restore humanity's original Adamic DNA, which would lead to us having all of these higher brainwave activities, gamma brainwaves and so forth, and us achieving extraordinarily high level of performance without mind control, without technological enhancements, without genetic enhancements. Well, I mean, restoring the genetic template. Some might consider that, well, that is genetic enhancement, isn't it? Well, if you kind of restore something to its original blueprint, is that genetic enhancement? Technically, I guess maybe you can say it is, but certainly Ea or Enki is offering humanity this choice about having a restoration of their original like Adamic blueprint. Now, I think if Elena is correct, let's just say we accept she's correct, well, would that represent an extraordinary challenge to the deep state? I mean, if you look at the deep state, everything that they've done for centuries is to keep humanity dumbed down, to keep us in this kind of lower state of consciousness where we are constantly squabbling amongst each other, divided and fighting amongst one another. Imagine someone like Ea comes along and suddenly activates higher brainwave functions and our ability to access universal knowledge directly rather than needing kind of like priesthoods or needing academics and scholars to kind of mediate everything for us. That would represent an extraordinary threat to the power functions of the deep state. Okay, so that's if Elena is correct that this really did happen. Well, one of the clues that something like this did happen was the fact that after she began talking about the return of Enki, I think it was in the latter part of 2021, as I recall, that Enki returned soon after the Cedar space fleets arrived in our solar system. And I recall Alex Collier, I remember him telling us, being one of the first to say Enki has returned. So there, and others have talked about that. Gilliland, I've interviewed James Gilliland, he's same thing. So a number of contactees have been getting from their sources that Ea or Enki has returned. So what happened? Elena Danaan comes out and says, I'm meeting with Enki. He's telling me all this information, sharing what he's done, that he's given the Adamic blueprint to the Galactic Federation of Worlds, which has shared that with Space Command, and Space Command is building these med beds that can restore the Adamic DNA, and I mean, incredible stuff. Okay, what happened? Not a month goes by after Elena starts revealing she's physically meeting with Enki here, that she begins experiencing personal attacks that were coordinated, that aimed to discredit her. So this was not just one person. There were several people, and one in particular just kind of appeared in nowhere and suddenly was given a platform on all of the kind of major, or all of these different UFO channels, YouTube channels. This person was getting a lot of airplay, making all these claims that, well, Elena Danaan, she's got it wrong, and she doesn't understand, she's corrupted, she's, all of these pejoratives, stigmatizing her in some way, saying Enki is evil and Enki shouldn't be trusted and she's a dupe, and all of these attacks. It wasn't just one person, it was coordinated, a wave of attacks. Why is that? Okay, maybe you say, a lot of people coming together doing this, there's a lot of opposition. All right, okay, a lot of opposition. Well, this is where we get something that happened just a few days ago, which brings into clarity brings into focus exactly what happened. So this was an interview that our good friend Danny Henderson did with Dave Rossi, who is an alternative, or who is a breakthrough technology inventor that is also a contactee, and because of the information he received, or the awakening he received as a result of his extraterrestrial contacts, suddenly was having these incredible pools of information given to him, and complex mathematical formulas appeared in his mind where he could solve all of these problems that hadn't been solved previously concerning various technologies that these breakthrough technology experts couldn't resolve. So there is a community out there of breakthrough technology experts, many of whom are plugged into the classified world, who get stuck into programs, who get stuck in classified programs on reverse engineering extraterrestrial technologies, and they kind of like share their knowledge in kind of like in these open source circles that are kind of hybrid, open source, classified, and they share their knowledge to kind of like see if anyone can come up with solutions to these problems. So Dave Rossi is one of these people. And so I've confirmed, because he shared information with me, he showed me some of the emails of his correspondence with some of these breakthrough technology scientists, and I know them. I know of them, let's say, and absolutely, Dave Rossi is plugged in to this kind of like hybrid, classified, open source world where these breakthrough technology scientists are trying to understand and reverse engineer extraterrestrial technologies. So this is what he said in his interview just a few days ago that came out with Danny Henderson.
Go to the Air Force departments that you mentioned that they are in particular surveilling Elena Danaan, Dr. Michael Salla. I'm sure Chris O'Connor, who's also brought space technology here in the form of the DEAMS device, which is a crystal magnetic handheld free energy device that actually helps to promote the piezoelectricity in our pineal gland, which is one of the worst things. The powers that think they are trying to prevent us, the human, from really recognizing what incredible organic technology we truly are, the power that we truly have embodied in this vessel that we inhabit right now. Can you tell me any of the Air Force departments that are particularly following and observing Elena Danaan?
Specifically, what I can tell you is that there is, in terms of a department, or dare I say a sub-department, one thing I can tell you is that this is the first time I'm actually saying this publicly. There would be elements out of what we know as the Aerospace Corporation that would be specifically surveilling certain individuals. And I don't want to, unfortunately, forgive me, at least publicly on the record, I don't want to get into specific detail as to the intricacies of how such operates. But what I can tell you is that there are certainly people that consider it the job to surveil Ms. Danaan, amongst others, for many hours a day, and weaponize and utilize stigma in an attempt to discredit her and others as well.
Right, I get it.
Okay, so there you have it. You have Elena Danaan being targeted, being monitored, being subjected to a campaign to stigmatize her by the Aerospace Corporation. So, I mean, thank you, Dave, for revealing that, because we know that the Aerospace Corporation is plugged in to that world of deep black projects that are involved in the reverse engineering, the study and reverse engineering of extraterrestrial technologies. And they're wanting the public to discredit Elena Danaan, and they have their operatives out there. That explains a lot about how, in particular, one person has appeared out of nowhere and suddenly began attacking Elena Danaan and got all this exposure in the UFO community. What that reveals is that there is a coordinated program to stigmatize Elena, while at the same time they're monitoring every word she utters because they know she is the real deal. So why does the deep state fear Elena Danaan and Enki Ea? Well, I think I've already gone over some of those reasons, because Enki, is himself, I believe, because he is an eternal. He's beyond this cycle of life and rebirth, so we could regard him as an ascended master with incredible knowledge that can trigger an awakening in people and help us achieve higher states of consciousness. So the deep state is wanting to discredit Elena Danaan and poison the public to say that, well, Enki is the great deceiver. Don't believe him. He is pure evil. Da da da. That's BS. Because you can go to the ancient texts. You can go to the Enuma Elish. You can go to the Atrahasis, Eridu Genesis, the story of Adapa. Many Sumerian texts all describe Enki as the benevolent protector of humanity, and his brother Enlil, the space commander, or Hu, as the asshole that screwed over humanity and wanted to just make us dumbed down workers that would just produce gold for him and so forth. So clearly, anyone that's putting out this nonsense that Enki is evil and Enlil is good, it's just coming, they just read it on bubblegum paper, while they're sitting on the toilet, on the dunny, as we say in Australia. A lot of people read bubblegum wraps on the dunny in Australia. So, it's what's the difference between an ascended master and, what's the difference between a master of wisdom and a wise guy? An ascended master has a fully activated crown chakra. A wise guy has a fully activated clown chakra. In Australia, we are really good at releasing a lot of clowns. I think we have more clowns per capita than any other nation on earth. So you can quote me on that and do the statistics. And I bet you Australia does have a greater per capita ratio of clowns to anywhere else in the world. Best comics in the world are Australians. Okay, so Enki Ea on Ascended Masters. I got to ask Elena, well, Elena, what does Enki Ea have to say about Ascended Masters? I don't know. What's his take on this? And, I gave her what I thought. My definition of an Ascended Master is, well, this is a being that can navigate space-time without technology. Pretty rudimentary definition, according, to my research. Mediocre meditator, but read a lot, and I'm very good at synthesizing materials. So maybe I can't be an ascended master myself, but I can understand what one is. So shows promise. Maybe get there eventually. Who knows? So ascended masters can navigate space-time without technology. The definition of ascended masters is of a being who has decoded the keys to free their consciousness and connect directly to source, thus access the infinite knowledge and wisdom. End quote. Well, now you know why the deep state doesn't want this guy openly interacting humanity. Because if he's going to put out information like this, the deep state doesn't stand a chance. Here you have a prince of the house of the Anu, of the Anunnaki, working with these high-level civilizations. That is an immortal, that is an ascended master, showing us how to connect directly with source, and how there are keys within our consciousness to do so. He went on. An ascended being is a being who transcended all levels of existence with their own consciousness. When a Hu, we can call that, that's a soul essence, human, transcends the layers of physicality of his 24 envelopes and the 12 layers of his spirit, he can merge directly into source consciousness. This is illumination. So that's similar to what we have coming from people like Paramahansa Yogananda, who describe the different states of samadhi, which is merging directly into source consciousness, where your ego consciousness merges directly into source through deep meditation, extended periods of solitude, and you're able to connect with that. And so this is a path for being able to achieve this ascended state of consciousness. And Ea goes on. This I found interesting, fascinating. Enlightenment versus alchemy. There are two paths by which a being can access unlimited awareness. These two paths are initiation and illumination. Illumination plugs you directly into the infinite knowledge and wisdom through transcendence, Nirvikalpa Samadhi and so forth. It is different from initiation, which is a long road with 24 portals of transmutation of physicality and 12 portals of transmutation of spirit. So here we're talking about alchemy, and Enki is the consummate alchemist. So if Blavatsky talked about ascended masters in the sense of beings who could achieve these higher states of consciousness through meditation and so forth, Ea is the master alchemist, or an ascended master who has achieved that highest state, the highest state of consciousness through this alchemical process. So this is why I think the deep state fears him and doesn't want us to work with him or to accept his knowledge, and of course to target and discredit Elena Danaan. So what are the pathways in a post-disclosure world? So as humanity enters a post-disclosure world where ET life is openly acknowledged and AI, artificial intelligence, becomes widespread, several pathways are open for individuals to deal with the challenges posed by open interactions with ET life and AI. So we are very quickly heading, this might be only a few months away, where we will transition from an insular society speculating and arguing over, do ETs exist, have extraterrestrial spacecraft crashed and are being secretly studied and fighting and arguing over that, to one where, holy shit, it's real. It really has been happening all over the world. And it's like the extraterrestrials are here and they're visiting us. What am I going to do? It's like, what are you going to do? Well, then you're going to start looking at all of this literature about, how do you interact with extraterrestrials? Well, you can only do it by achieving higher gamma brainwave states. Well, I describe 4 ways of doing it. The mind control. No one wants to go through mind control. Technological enhancements. Who wants to have their Borg implants inserted into them? Biological enhancements, genetic enhancements. Well, that's going to lead to certain problems with people. Then there's the organic path, the path of like meditation, natural meditation states, walking in nature. What's the pistachio nuts? Pistachio nuts. Okay, pistachio nuts. Anything to increase your gamma brain wave activity so that you then can openly interact and communicate with extraterrestrials and access their technologies. Because that's going to be the big thing in the future. Those that can do this, they're going to be ones that are going to get ahead. Those that have no clue how extraterrestrial technologies work or what can be reverse engineered, what might be a breakthrough technology that's here or communicate with extraterrestrials, you're going to be behind the 8 ball. So this is why I think this is going to become very important, these pathways. So super soldiers, mind programming, genetic enhancements, technological enhancements, gamma brainwave activation. As I just said, these are the different pathways one can follow to achieve these exemplary human states. Whether you become a super soldier, whether you become a athlete, or you achieve peak performance in some other way, any of these offer a means to be able to do that. But certainly, who wants to have some of those things done to you? And certainly the gamma brainwave activation process using natural organic processes is the least invasive and least disruptive. Of course, pathways confronting humanity. I think this is the one that's going to appeal to just about everyone watching this. Maybe some of you are aspiring Borg clones. Okay, great. Thank you for coming and participating in this. For the rest of us, I'm sure this is what appeals to us. Spiritual enlightenment or alchemy. I think alchemy is the big one here, because alchemists have been trashed. Unfortunately, in our culture, the Western culture, global culture, alchemy has been often associated with magic, sorcery, witchcraft, and kind of like attacked and denigrated. And anyone practicing alchemy has to be very, very careful. But I think in this post-disclosure world, alchemy is going to return. Certainly Enki, Ea, and beings that work with him, Anunnaki scientists that work with him and others, they're going to bring alchemy back. And that is a path to transcendence as well. So masters of wisdom and ascended masters. Again, developing these extraordinarily high levels of wisdom to be able to interact and help the world, or ascended mastery, where you break that cycle of reincarnation.
You have been listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Join or start a conversation in the comments. Take the time to explore the vast library of best-selling books, webinars, and podcasts by Dr. Salla. Visit exopoliticstoday.com.